final installment of our podcast series on the state of sexual assault and sexual assault survivors on the UNI campus. For this final episode, we have our group together to just kind of recap what we have learned through our various interviews and talk about steps moving forward for those who are interested in, joining in on the issue of sexual assault on our campus. So we're going to start with Shannon, who did our first interview.
Hi, I'm Shannon. I interviewed a sexual assault survivor who actually was gracious enough to come in and talk to us about her story and kind of the things that she went through. She did get into some pretty intense detail, but I think that's good for the conversation to kind of put yourself in her perspective and see things from where she was coming from. We also talked a little bit about the steps that she took legally and then kind of some things on campus that affect her and how she has to navigate life differently now, especially on campus, than she ever had to before. And so that was pretty eye-opening, I thought, and was a really great conversation starter to kind of lead us into some other areas to start opening some discussion.
Awesome. So I'm Angie. I did the interview with Rachel Sharkey from the Riverview Center. So we kind of just talked about, what her position is on campus and how she is a resource to those who have been sexually assaulted. It was new for me. I didn't even know that she was a resource. So it was kind of eye-opening just to hear as a student what you can do after you've been sexually assaulted, and her office is a different avenue that you can take. So she comes in with support and kind of guides you, maybe taking legal steps if you want to go that way, or if you just need to talk to her about what happened. But everything is confidential in her office, so it's a safe place that you can go on campus. Her door is always open. And then we just kind of got into talking about, sexual harassment on specifically UNI's campus and how frequent it actually does happen, which was, again, eye-opening to me. I feel like I was just very naive before learning about all of this. So Rachel is a great resource on campus, and she brought a lot of different information to the table.
I think the biggest part, too, with Rachel's interview that shocked me was learning about Riverview and more of what Riverview does, because Angie and I had no idea that Riverview covers the entire northeast Iowa. So that's just one outreach program that you have for that huge area. So I think we were both pretty shocked by that.
Yes. As we're both from northeast Iowa too, so she covers our specific counties that we live in and we were grown up in. But she was plucked out of Riverview just for UNI, but it was still eye-opening to see that they covered that large of an area. So,
I'm Sydney here, and I talked to Leah here on campus. She is a Title IX officer, and when I talked to her, she kind of talked about her position here on campus and where her office is, which is in Gilchrist. She said tucked away, and that was kind of like a strategic thing they did. And she talked about some of the things they did when talking about sexual assault on campus and the communication with that, as well as she talked about some of the resources here on campus with counseling, as well as Rachel with Riverview, and some of the things they're doing on campus to get awareness more out on campus as well. Is there anything else really?
I mean, being able to sit in on all of them, it was interesting to go from Rachel to Leah, just because you do see a big difference there, just in the way that they talk about their sexual assault, sexual violence, because Leah obviously has bigger restrictions with what she can and can't do.
With the law and what it requires, and theirs deals more with moving accommodations, and they said also that professors kind of just saying like what's going on and kind of appeal to that to
Right.
let them know what's going on. They'll help with that communication aspect.
Because ultimately, Leah, as the Title IX coordinator, works for the university, whereas Rachel doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
So
So
that's
it's
a big
kind of like-
difference.
I mean, not to like say anything, but I mean, Rachel's biggest priority are the survivors, and Leah's
Exactly.
is the university
Liability.
So,
yeah.
yeah,
Which doesn't mean she doesn't do a great
right,
job. And
exactly. I'm
doesn't
not trying
care.
to take away
Yeah,
from
no, but
anything.
that's a pattern among Title IX.
Yeah.
A lot of survivors end up not trusting Title IX coordinators because they tend to put liability in front of
hmm
survivor care.
But it does sound like they work pretty closely
Mhm.
with each other.
Cool.
Just because like they had talked before our interview, even.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they knew.
Yeah.
They knew that
Yeah,
we were
They're
both
like, yeah,
like-
we talked to each
she
other.
knew that she had been Rachel had been interviewed, so she
Mhm.
kind of talked about like what she did
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
how they worked together.
I
And
think having both of them on campus is great because Rachel says if they want to go through the legal process, then she sends them to Leah,
Mhm.
and Leah probably does the same thing if they need more, talking face to face and support. Leah probably sends them to
Right.
Rachel, so it's a
Yeah.
good
Even
balance.
talking with our survivors, she definitely mentioned, I mean, she didn't mention Rachel by name, but she just talked about her advocate, like her campus
Okay.
advocate, and how much she appreciated that she does not have to go to any of her court things if she doesn't want to, that her advocate will represent her to any of her professors and has had to before. And she really said that that wasn't something that she was aware of before, but now, and I am assuming that it's Rachel, I didn't ask, but from what I've heard, like dealing with the police and everything like that, how grateful she is to have that resource like so readily available to her.
Yeah.
And like
Imagine if
easy
she
access.
didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right.
I don't remember her mentioning anything about the Title IX coordinator though, so I think that does kind of like a little bit kind of back up your point about how the advocate definitely seems to be like definitely in closer relations with the survivor, which I think is really interesting and like important to note. And we really only have the one. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just Rachel here,
Yeah.
so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sarah,
Well,
take it away.
I'm losing my voice. I interviewed Dr. Heisterkamp from the Center for Violence Prevention, and I work really closely with him in my GA-ship, but the reason we chose to interview someone from the Center for Violence Prevention is because of the work they do in violence prevention, and a lot of people aren't even aware we have a center. Like, did any of you
I
guys?
had no
I
idea.
had
Nope.
no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think is part on the university, and I do think the Center for Violence Prevention could be doing better. But what Dr. Heisterkamp, he talked a lot about work that he does in the community. So CVP works really closely with the Mentors in Violence Prevention program, which tries really hard to engage men in the conversation and, kind of switches the topic of sexual assault as a women's problem to a men's problem. So he works really closely with high schools and sports teams. He's worked with military groups, but as much as he does work on campus, I think that our conversation with him reinforced for me that there's just not enough activism on campus being done. So from the prevention lens, Alan talked about there's primary prevention, which is educating on the topic before it happens, wherein secondary prevention is things that like Rachel does, so preventing someone from being assaulted again or re-victimized. And I think that on this campus we tend to focus on secondary prevention. The only primary prevention I can think of is Sexual Assault Awareness Week, which we can talk a little bit about in a second, because that in its own right has some problems. But yeah, so what I got from the interview was like great work is being done, but for our campus I think there still needs to be it needs to be a student-run thing, and the Center for Violence Prevention is run by, 2 male professors who are doing great work in the community, but I left feeling like there still needs to be a lot done as far as prevention, education, awareness, advocacy
I
on
felt
campus.
the same thing, I think. So
I
Yeah.
definitely feel like the education even is less preventative of like the incident itself and more like what do you do when it inevitably happens.
Right.
Like here's education for like even the bystander whatever instead of, so that's obviously great information and education to have, but I definitely see how that's still honestly not even primary prevention, that's still secondary. You're still responding to something that's already happened. And it's awesome that we have that building block, but there's definitely a little more ways to go, I would say.
Yeah. Honestly, throughout this whole thing and this whole project, I just felt naive, like, when I first came into college, because, you don't think it's ever going to happen to you when you first take those tests and those exercises that we had to do, and you don't think it's ever going to happen to any of your friends. And still today, it hasn't happened to me, hasn't happened to anybody close to me. And I feel like a lot of students are probably in the same boat where they're just not aware of it or how frequent it happens. And even though it's not like affecting me personally, I feel like it's still something that every student should know, maybe what to do or how to prevent it.
yeah.
So
I mean, I think like I was the same way as you, and then freshman year when I got that first like email about an incident had occurred, it was kind of a wake up call that wow, like that actually is a real thing. I didn't even know. So
It even seems really far removed, the email, and they tell you these statistics. You come in, you're like, there's like 1 in 3 or 4 chance, 1 in 4 chance that like you or someone you know, and so the email seems far removed until it does happen to somebody that you know, and then you're like, wow, now I am a part of that statistic where I do like, I don't know, somebody in my network, in my close friend group, whatever, has had this happen, and now I am one of the people that knows the 1 in 4. It just kind of like brings you in, and it's not something that I genuinely ever like could have conceived how much it affects other people as well. And just then I was definitely extremely naive like you were about the effects that it has and how common it is and scary it is. I don't know.
And I have to say, like, even if you think you don't know somebody, you
probably
almost certainly do. Like, even if it's just people in your class. I mean, we've probably, like, through the interview process, I'm sure we've all learned that it's, like, really hard to come forward and even talk about it because there's so much stigma. But going back to what you said about, like, coming into college, I think that UNI needs to, and UNI is not alone in this, like, colleges across the nation are really not doing well with this, but I think that we really need to work on educating incoming students because, we touched a little bit at the beginning of the semester about the red zone, which is, I believe it's the first 6 weeks of classes. That's when the most sexual assaults happen on campuses. So, from that point forward, it becomes secondary prevention instead of primary prevention.
Right.
So, I don't know. Do you think that the online tests are enough? Like,
I mean, it's a good start when you first come into college. Like, my mom was like, "Oh, be careful," but like when you that's the first initial thing that you have to do. But then after my years went on, like I'm 3rd-year student here, and that's kind of on the back burner for me. Like it's not relevant. Like we don't have to think about it. We don't have to take those tests ever again.
yeah.
And when you first come into college, like they give you that before you even start like your college experience. So how do you even know you're gonna go through so much after that first I don't even know, training or whatever it's called. I feel like you're gonna go through so much and then you're never gonna like learn about it ever
And during
again.
that time, a lot is being thrown at you. I mean, you're moving to a whole different place. You're learning how to navigate Blackboard learning. You're
Yeah.
learning how to like operate all of these things that they're throwing you these like PowerPoint quizzes at, and then it just kind of sometimes to me seems like another thing to check off of a to-do list.
Yeah.
And I don't really know that I have an answer or even kind of like a thought formed yet about what you would even have to do to kind of change how that is. I mean, that's just, it's hard because you come in, you're 18 years old, usually, whatever, thinking that, you know, nothing bad's gonna happen to you, nothing bad's gonna happen to any of your friends. You're like feeling like the invincible teenager, and until something bad happens, it's really, really hard, I think, to nail that into people's heads.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
And it sucks, but, you know, looking at my undergrad, like, education during, like, orientation, it was focused on what can girls do. Like, stay in groups, watch your drinks. But when you think about it, I mean, I'm all for engaging men, but can we change the attitudes of a generation of patriarchy and misogyny and sexism? And can we you can't change that in one session.
Quiz,
Yes.
Right.
like
So it's really
PowerPoint.
hard to balance that, because I'm all for, like, you know, making this a men's problem, because the reality is, yeah, men are sexually assaulted, but 99% of sexual assaults, no matter who's being assaulted, are by men. Men are the ones assaulting people. And, you know, not all men, blah, blah, blah. I'm not
Right.
saying all men are
Right.
violent, but that's a men's issue. But I don't know how to bring that to our campus in a comprehensive education program, you
Right.
know?
I almost think that if they, you know, my first idea was like, we should take the training every year. But I feel like students would just be like, oh, they're training again. Like, you have to
Right,
do this before we
It'd
sign
be
up
like
for
a thing that you begin to
classes.
resent,
It's
right?
going to be something that they dread, and people are just going to click through it just to get it over with. I don't think it's
Hammering
actually,
statistics into people's heads, like,
it's that's
you
not
know.
beneficial at all,
it
right?
doesn't put a face to the...
Which I
Right.
kind of think brings us into the sexual assault week thing and like the panel, and I think that those are very powerful things to hear, like
Yeah.
true life, actual real stories from people.
Yeah.
And I mean, the person who I interviewed, our survivor, was actually invited to speak on one of those panels, and as much she did say that she like loves that, and she like definitely thinks that's an important thing, she just wasn't ready. I mean,
Sure.
which is totally understandable, but I think things like that are greatly underrated in how impactful they are,
Sure.
and especially by the university, who again can sometimes be focused on liability, like you're up here speaking about things that are uncomfortable, and the chances are that somebody's gonna find something wrong with it, or I don't know, something
And
like
that things that happen on our campus.
Yes, things that are happening on our campus,
Yeah.
you know, spilling things like that. I think that it kind of gets downplayed a little bit how impactful and educational stories can be,
Yeah.
which, yeah, is kind of one way to look at it. But again, how do you get men to engage in that, to go to them and listen to
Yeah.
that, you know? I'm not sure.
Which, like, I don't know how many SIG apps are gonna listen to this, and not to, like, pardon my French, but not to, like, shit on them. But, you know, it was really frustrating for me. I don't know about anyone else, but at Take Back the Night, which was 3 days after the end of Sexual Assault Awareness Week, there was 3 men there, and none of them were from SIGAP. So for
Never even
me,
thought about that. Yeah.
that indicates that it's like, well, yeah, we're doing it for, like, our fraternity, but, like,
But do we actually care? No.
I don't know. Yeah, and, you know, it's like maybe they didn't see the posters, or maybe they
Right.
didn't hear about it, but I don't know. And I would love to know, like, just to throw this out there, like, what do you guys think about performative awareness? So, like, the seesaw. Do you think that's bringing awareness to campus, or do you think that that time and energy and those resources could be used into telling stories? Or
I mean, I didn't actually see it on campus,
Mhm.
but I saw, I think Leah brought it up, and then it was like, it happened, and I just saw, like, on people's Snapchat stories. It was like, come to the Saw, or like, they were like 2 girls, like, on it, like, whatever. But, so I think that loses some of the value of it, is if it's just a thing that you're posting on your Snapchat and you're not telling people, like, okay, what is it, you know?
Yeah.
Because, like, if I hadn't talked to Leah, I wouldn't know
Yeah.
why there was a seesaw, why they were on it, but they put it on their Snapchat. So, I don't know. That kind of annoyed me, in a way, so.
I think Danielle will hopefully appreciate this little comment that kind of brings us into like the slacktivism type of thing that we really discussed that one day in class. We discussed slacktivism and how, yes, it might be bringing awareness or something like that, but it's not necessarily activism because you're not really doing anything to make a change. Like, bringing awareness to issues is important, yes, and like the fact that that's out there and pretty accessible to people and like something that's, you know, like kind of fun, but then you're like, oh, here's an issue, but I don't know if the issue is not really being acted on. You're just seesawing. What are you actually doing to do anything? It's kind of slacking. I mean, yeah, awareness, great, but not necessarily making a difference.
Yeah.
Which I think there's a lot of that goes on around campus, is just be aware of this, like this is happening, but not so much action based. Here's actually what you can do to make a change.
Yeah. And I don't, you know, I can only speak to, I don't know a lot about that particular Greek organization, but speaking from what I know about, like, my undergrad Greek organizations, and I'm not painting a broad stroke or anything, but, you know, a lot of the organizations that did donate their philanthropy to victim services or sexual assault services, like, for example, one of them at my undergrad donated to the local victim services agency, and that agency also worked with human trafficking victims, and that fraternity held an auction every year. Like, fraternities do that a lot, but it'll be like, buy a brother, you know, buy a date with a brother, and it's like, sorry, you're donating that to human trafficking victims?
Wow. Yeah.
Like, it's just, it's like, yeah, but
We're like, whose brain was not turned on during that? Like,
apparently nobody's, like, in the whole organization, but, you know, it's like that criticism that was thrown at them. They're like, but it doesn't matter, like, we're still donating money, like, who cares how we get it? And it's kind of like, but that performative activism can be really damaging.
Yeah.
And I think for me, and I think a lot of the criticism with, like, Sexual Assault Awareness Week is, why is it a week? Why are you only doing that for 1 week? Why is the seesaw only for 24 hours if you're going to do this seesaw thing? Not that they could do it all year long, but, you know, why not go to Take Back the Night even though it's outside of your week? Why not do a survivor panel in October instead of in April?
Right.
You know?
And I think, just to make comment on the Sexual Assault Awareness Week thing, I think awareness is awesome, but after speaking with the victim, I am definitely very hypercritical of it now, because she pointed out that the same banner that was used for Saw was the same, like, size and same looking one that they used for Pride Week, and she immediately thought, I'm not proud of this. This is not, like, an identity that I chose. This was one that was handed to me, and it is being treated like a celebration week when it's something that I don't want to think about and I don't want to have in giant sprawling letters in a banner, like, above me, and how that, I think, is a little bit insensitive. Now I definitely, like, overthink it. So again, awareness, good, yes, I'm never gonna, like, not be happy with bringing awareness to an issue, but I think on campus, like I said, it's very kind of not well thought out, I wouldn't say, at all. for the most part.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, I keep going back to the seesaw, but it's like, how is seeing two people like giggling and like going up and down? It's like, what is this for?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
but wow, that's really powerful what your interviewee said about being handed an identity. Like, yeah, I wonder how do you think, I don't know, like, to wrap up without putting it all on the shoulders of SIGEP, because it's not
Right.
their job, but how can we do better on campus? Like, how can we turn awareness into activism, and like, how can we stop like bringing down survivors and empowering them instead?
I don't know. I think that's a pretty heavy question. that
Yeah.
If we had one simple answer to, then
Yeah.
hopefully we wouldn't have to be sitting here doing things like this. But I don't know. I definitely think the root is for sure education and focus on true, genuine primary prevention, which I think is very lacking in many, many things, not just sexual assault, sexual violence, anything like that. But genuine education on like being good to people. I don't know.
And consent. We haven't
Yes.
said consent at all, but
Yes,
yeah.
that I think is also very important. And like we discussed for quite a while there, I don't know what education plan is perfect for that or how to do it, but I think even just having things like this with an open conversation is like helpful. So
I mean, look how much it impacted me. Like, if I would never have taken this class, or I would never have known of Riverview or the different resources until maybe I was in that position, and then I had to like scramble to figure out what to do next. I don't know. I feel like word of mouth and hearing perspective like from the students, I feel
I was
that
just gonna say,
drives.
I think student involvement is a
yeah.
big part of what we could do better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we have all these people we interviewed who are doing things for the university and trying to make it better. But how many students did we talk to? Like, that are really trying to? I mean, obviously, there's us, but I just think there could be more.
Yeah. Do you think that, well, I guess, you know, coming from someone that's been in Iowa for only like 8 months, I think also we really need to work on this campus, like abandoning that, like, it's not my business attitude.
It's just
Like, sexual assault is your business, because you could, you know,
Right.
I guarantee you know somebody, it could be you, blah blah blah. It is your business. Being part of a community, like,
where things like this happen.
yeah, it's just it's not right to just pretend it's not your problem. So I think that is part of the issue on campus too. I think it's like, well, I haven't been assaulted, so
Right.
That's very true.
yeah.
Me.
I mean, no shame. Like, you're not the only one.
Hey, that's just how it is. I'll say it.
Yeah, but like, I don't know. And we also, I think we owe it to survivors who, like, I'm thinking about the Take Back the Night survivor who's been assaulted 3 times in her lifetimes thus far.
Yes.
I mean,
She's young.
God
She
forbid,
is
like,
young, yes.
that it keeps going, but you know, statistics show that like predators know who they can victimize, and that victimization comes when our community doesn't support survivors and getting healing and getting help and being supported. And I'm not saying it's victims' fault, but predators are predators, and they know who they can manipulate. And so I think that we're really putting like survivors on campus at risk by not being more active on the issue.
I agree.
Any
Anything
final
else?
thoughts?
I think we covered a lot of good ground.
So get out there, damn it.
Yeah. Really. Well, I
Don't
hope.
assault people.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, for real.
I hope that you all our listeners were able to learn something new or become better educated on the topic, and it's kind of what our main goal was, and I think we talked a lot about that today. So we really appreciate you for listening and hopefully going out and doing something about it.